When you think of World War II, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably tanks, big battles, the famous images we've all seen, right? And yeah, that's definitely part of the story. But there is a whole other side to the war, a secret history, really, hiding just below the surface. So let's dive into that. Is it just about those epic clashes between armies and nations that fill the history books? Or is it something a lot more complex, a little stranger, and honestly, way more revealing about what humans are capable of when we're pushed to the brink? For example, what if I told you it was a war fought not just with bullets and bombs, but with bats? Yes, bats. Or by dogs sent on missions that could literally decide the fate of an entire platoon? Or that it was waged from secret cities buried deep beneath the earth, completely hidden from the world? Believe it or not, the answer to all of that is a resounding yes. And that, right there, is where our story really begins. All right, first up, we're heading into the shadows. We're going to look at the secret war of minds and machines, the coded messages and bizarre weapons that could change everything in a single moment. Okay, so meet the Enigma. For the German High Command, this thing was basically their key to winning the war. It was this incredible machine that scrambled top secret messages into what looked like complete gibberish. And everyone, absolutely everyone, believed it was unbreakable. So how did this thing actually work? It was pure genius. An operator presses a key, let's say A, an electrical signal then just zips through this crazy maze, first a plug board, then a series of rotating wheels called scramblers. Then, a reflector sends that signal all the way back through the scramblers, but on a totally different path. And finally, a completely different letter lights up. The kicker? Every single time you press a key, the rotors turn, changing the entire electrical path. It was brilliant, truly. But this is what's so fascinating about the war. It had this kind of split personality. On one side, you have the high-tech, strategic brilliance of the Enigma. Of course, it had one tiny, fatal flaw. A letter could never be encrypted as itself. And that was the little crack the Allied codebreakers needed to smash it open. And then on the other side, you had some of the most bizarre ingenuity you can possibly imagine. This is where it gets wild. The US military was seriously working on bat bombs. The idea was to strap tiny fire starters to bats and just unleash them over Japan. The British built something called the Great Panjandrum, which was basically a giant rocket-powered explosive wheel that was, surprise, surprise, completely uncontrollable. The Germans had these little remote-controlled mini-tanks full of explosives and even made a curved rifle barrel so you could shoot around corners. It's just this incredible list of desperate, out-of-the-box thinking. It shows you that when the stakes are that high, literally no idea is too crazy. Now, the war wasn't just fought with strange weapons on the surface. A huge part of it was waged from hidden places. So for this next part, we're going to go underground. Just look at this number. 500,000. That's how many concrete bunkers were built in the tiny country of Albania alone after the war. It's this direct legacy of the defensive, bunker-obsessed mindset that World War II burned into the entire world's psyche. Back then, these places had only one purpose: to be a shield. They were these grim, fortified holes in the ground built completely out of fear. But today? Today they have this incredible second life. What were once spaces for destruction are now becoming spaces for creation. It's amazing. These old fortresses of war have been totally reimagined. They're now museums and art galleries, really cool and unique hotels, music studios, even nightclubs. There's one near Prague that's a pet crematorium. And in Dusseldorf, Germany, one was transformed piece by piece into a church. And that church in Dusseldorf, well, it couldn't have picked a more perfect emblem for this whole idea of renewal. It took on the motto, "And they shall beat their swords into plowshares." It's just the perfect symbol of turning these instruments of war into tools for peace. Okay, so we've looked at the hidden places. Now let's turn to the hidden faces of the war. The unsung participants whose incredible stories are so often left out of the main narrative. Get this, nearly 1 million women served in the Soviet Red Army during the war. 1 million. And 80,000 of them were officers. These numbers are just staggering, and they completely shatter that traditional all-male picture of the front lines. But you have to understand, these women were fighting a battle on two fronts. On top of facing the enemy, they had to deal with a lack of proper uniforms. They faced sexual harassment within their own ranks, and when they finally came home, they were often met with prejudice. Their courage wasn't just about facing enemy fire. It was about surviving in a system that wasn't even built for them.
And the unsung heroes weren't all human. Over 60,000 dogs officially served in the Soviet military, and their stories are both awe-inspiring and, in some cases, absolutely heartbreaking.
I mean, this is one of the war's most brutal tactics. The Soviets trained so-called anti-tank dogs that destroyed more than 300 enemy tanks. These poor animals would carry explosives to their targets in what were, tragically, one-way missions. It's just a stark, brutal reminder of the desperation of total war. But then, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have the medic dogs. They were symbols of hope. These dogs rescued an estimated 700,000 wounded soldiers, crawling through active battlefields to bring medical supplies to men who would have been left for dead. Can you just imagine that? Lying there, wounded and alone, and then this animal just appears out of nowhere like a lifeline? Okay, so for our final section, after looking at the hidden weapons, the secret places, and the unsung participants, let's talk about how the story of the war itself is told. Because that story has been shaped and reshaped over and over again. So, quick question. When did World War II end? We think of it as a single day, right? But the reality is so much messier. Germany surrendered to the Western Allies on May 8th. But because of the time difference, the Soviet Union has always celebrated Victory Day on May 9th. The World War didn't officially end until Japan surrendered in September. And then there's this little detail. The USSR didn't formally end its state of war with Germany until 1955, a whole decade later. And this, right here, shows how even the facts can become political weapons. Under Stalin, the official Soviet death toll was around 7 million. Then, under Khrushchev, that number suddenly jumped to 20 million. By the late 80s, it climbed again to 26 million. And now, modern estimates in Russia suggest a loss of maybe up to 43 million people. History isn't just about what happened. It's also about who gets to tell the story and when they decide to tell it. Which really leaves us with one final big question. You've probably heard the saying, history is written by the victors. But what this whole journey into the unseen war shows us is that so much of the real story, the human story, happens way outside the main headlines. It just makes you wonder, right? What other incredible stories are still out there, hiding in the margins, just waiting to be told?